Self-sabotage. It surely is a thing that has come to exist in our world. My name is Mustached Tom, and I'm here to review Disney's Snow White, the live-action remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. As you can see, that title has been now shortened to just be Snow White. So that should already tell you just what they were willing to remove. Now, I will show my bias in terms of the original movies. I recognize that Snow White was the OG of OGs. However, if you were to line up the Disney princess assortment of movies, obviously, I would argue even from a writing standpoint, Snow White's probably on the lower end of the written stories of Disney's renaissance that I would, pick. In fact, I'd probably say it's probably close to The Little Mermaid in terms of where I would rank it. If you don't remember my review of the Little Mermaid that I did, I said as much. I said that, I found that obviously the musical aspect of The Little Mermaid carries pretty much that entire movie, and the rest of the story is kind of bland and boring. Much in the same way as I find Snow White, in that I didn't find the particular original story that interesting. Her as a character, not that interesting. Obviously you had Maleficent, who does stand out in a sense. But in comparison to other villains, I probably wouldn't even say that she would be my top pick either, so not even. So yeah. So there's two ways to look at this movie. Is the pure value of it, that being obviously that Snow White as a buck-to-buck value movie, the original, it kicked off Disney. As a story, it's sort of meh. It's sort of boring. But I'm just gonna be real. I'm not here to, hype up something that I don't believe to be true. I don't think Snow White's all that interesting of a story. Just, So yeah, when there was a live-action remake, which we already have been in the era of live-action remakes for quite a while now, ever since the Jungle Book remake ushered in that new sloth of remakes, and each one has seemingly dwindled, its appreciation from the original source. And now there's just a whole slew of them from Lilo and Stitch as well that's also coming out later on this year. I think there's one other live action remake also coming out that I'm already forgetting, but whatever. Point being is that obviously I'm here to strictly talk about what's in this remake, what is just in this movie. So I'm going to try to keep the comparisons to zero, or as close to zero past this little introduction point as conceivably possible. I think that's the best fair way to be objective about any movie, is to keep the comparisons as minimal as possible. So anyway, with that out of the way, the movie starts off, the live-action remake, that is, with the storybook opening that is very attached to very iconic, stories of old, I suppose, or more vintage. Anywho, they say in this iteration that Snow White got her name from her being born in the winter. And you know what? I know other people have mocked this, saying, "Oh, she's not white," blah blah, whatever. Fuck it. Like, we're already in a system where, like, you've already shifted the Little Mermaid to be black, and that was fine. I argued already that I would say that the live action remake is actually, that one is actually better, technically, just from a writing standpoint, not visually, as a movie than the original. To make that distinction very, very clear, in case people are going to be like, "Oh, but the CGI..." I know the CGI was a fucking disaster for The Little Mermaid, I'm aware. But I'm here to focus on the writing. So fine, I'm willing to play along, like, okay, she's born in the winter, so she's named after the snow, and the snow being white, so it was just her full name being inspired by that. And they open us up with a new song about how her father wants, primarily her father, the mother chimes in a little bit, but it's primarily her father who instills in her the values that he wants her to live by, to be kind, fair, and brave, essentially. And he gives her this little necklace in this juncture of the movie to just reinstill these values as a permanent little, like, okay. So we see her as this little princess. She goes through the town. She's instilled upon these values. But as the narration continues, the queen passes away due to an illness. This is a bit vague, so I don't know. But as time wanes on, the evil queen, Maleficent, strides on in from the south to here, wherever here is. It's actually kind of vague. And she takes sort of the place, and she immediately begins to shift how things are being done. From having a magic mirror in the first place, that's just there. And asking the mirror who's the fairest of them all, it answers her currently as of this juncture of the movie at any rate. And she eventually tricks the king into thinking that there is some sort of threat outside, so he himself, with an army of men, head out into the forest, never to be seen again. But now, with both the king and, queen already gone, the new presiding queen is able to fully take over, have Snow White demoted from a princess to a servant, and have some of the people who are there go from, happy-go-lucky to a very militant, as in, like, they directly serve the queen. Now, of course, I did mention how I was going to briefly not mention it too much, but I will mention it here, in that none of this, obviously, is in the original movie. In that the original movie does not address the politics of the world of Snow White. Now, this has been criticized from what I've seen thus far, and I don't understand any of these, at least the criticisms I've seen so far of that, of the world building being potentially expanded upon, being a downgrade. I don't know why that's a bad thing all of a sudden. So, obviously Snow White is supposed to depict a very classical setting, and it's very pinned down by royalty, kings, queens, princesses, and princes. That is very much in line with, like, very classical thinking. And with that, I would assume, or, kind of attach to that, at least I would, in writing myself, well, okay, so how do they rule? That kind of comes into the question. Obviously, they don't rule how, America is currently, or has been ruled in a long time, obviously. We have elections and all that. And, but obviously there was a time and a place before where you had kings and queens and all that stuff. So, and, historically speaking, kings, typically speaking, were the ones who were, like, the top, like, everyone, respected the king. In historical context, like, Queen Elizabeth is, like, the only exception to my historical knowledge that breaks that mold. There probably may be one or two others, but I'm not familiar with them, other queens that being in real life. So yeah, like, having a political add-on to this type of movie logistically makes sense. Like, yeah, in fact, that would actually make me criticize the original movie, if anything. Like, yeah, like, why would we have all of this kingdom-related stuff and the movie barely obligates itself to that? Like, what would be the point of, like, what is the point of it being kings and queens, right? That basically drives back the basic of basic questions. Strip everything else away. Like, why, ask yourself as a writer, why would you have yourself, in a setting, have kings and queens if you're not going to depict how they rule? How the kingdom works? These questions are going to come up when you have kings and queens. That's writing 101. So yeah, I'm actually going to criticize the original on that one. It doesn't address that, and it's kind of weird that it never did. Anywho, getting back to this movie, it has its own plethora of issues. That's just not one of them. Objectively speaking, like, yeah, that kind of seems to go hand in hand, that if you're going to have, again, kings and queens, that you would kind of want to understand how the political aspect of that works out and in tow. Anywho, so we follow, once upon a time, a Prince Charming is now a thief in the name of Jonathan, who's kind of is actually a character first and foremost. So again, I'm criticizing the original because, spoiler alert, Prince Charming is not a character. He's not. He's like a stand-in, generic, insert hero, like, bare bones as fuck. And yeah, there are characters in this story that are also that, so I'm gonna point those out, but it's not this character. He actually has a character, so I'm gonna just, again, allude to that. So he is a thief, so he does kind of take on the Aladdin approach more so in this movie. Take from the rich, give to the poor attitude. So obviously they're not doing the Prince Charming thing anymore, which, again, there wasn't a character there, so I'm not even remotely surprised that they actually tried to give a character, even though this character has been, like, utilized in other, animated topics. Enchanted as well. Flynn Rider, he's the other thief, like the dashing good-looking thief, right? Very much of an Enchanted vibe as well. Though I would argue Flynn Rider has a little bit more of that suave nature. I never really got that from this Jonathan character. He's not quite there. He doesn't have that side of, like, he kind of gives a little bit of attitude. It's like a knockoff Flynn, is what I'm trying to get at here. And that should tell you everything you need to know about this character, is that, yeah, while still being an actual character, it's still a downgraded version of an existing Disney character. So, again, I'm not just here to, compliment this new movie. I'm here to be as objective as possible. If there are other examples where it's done well, I'm going to point those out. So anyways, so he takes the supplies and goes off, and Snow White has been in service for so long that she's sort of deluded herself into thinking that, like, Snow White is, like, this outward, like, thing that she's lost, and so she almost, like, she speaks as if, again, at least to him, initially, that Snow White is this different being all entirely from herself. So she demotes herself as a character pretty early on, or it's put upon her, rather, this demotion of characterization that is placed upon her due to circumstance. Which, I would think kind of go hand in hand. I would figure as much. But we do see the Queen showing off that to the people, like, or to her rather, I think it was her, rather than being a flower that can wither away, to be like a diamond, very rough, very rigid, very militant, focused, and heavy in terms of, again, the very way she intends to keep ruling this kingdom. And the thief in question is shortly captured after he got away, or almost got away. So, I think his initial punishment was just being taken to the dungeon, or just simply being beheaded or something. I forget what the initial punishment was. But Snow White tries to push back slightly, saying that the punishment should fit the crime, rather, and not be too crazy. So she retorts back, the Queen does, saying that that he'll be stolen from his very clothes and be hung out to freeze to death, essentially, in the cold weather. So, after she's left alone, she's brought into her second song, and I don't remember what the song is called exactly, but it's like sort of like this sort of giving up low point song, essentially. But she eventually makes her way outside during that song, sees the thief tied up, so she decides to release him and give him the bread that he had been holding on to. So, this is the first time the Queen returns to the mirror and once again asks it a question, and it has now changed its stance on who's the fairest, now choosing Snow White. This is where she decides that she's going to get the huntsman to have the, Snow White taken from the castle so that there's not a scene at the castle, and killed out in the forest to gather apples. So they head out, the huntsman and Snow White. And as she's gathering apples, she offers him one, and yes, the writing does go very, like, feeding the audience of, like, she is kind. Yes, I recognize that that is very poor. Like, you could have alluded to kindness, and you know, you could have just simply had him say thank you. Like, you did not have to have him say, like, oh, you are kind. Like, very bizarre in terms of, like, writing quality. Of, like, you could just make him sound like a human instead of, like, clearly speaking a message, which is clearly what that interaction was, of him saying, you are kind. He could, again, sound more natural, just thanking her for the offer. And so he wants to get her away. So I think the idea here is, and it's not presented the best here in terms of the acting, like, he kind of begins to shout at her, like, oh, before I change my mind. I think that was all in juncture of, like, he was still not willing to do it, but he was willing to, like, trick her into still heading away from the castle, I think. And I think there should have been more focus on him, as, you know, sit on him a little bit longer, see, like, how hurt he was to have put on that display of, like, oh, I have to be this type of person right now in order to get her to go further away, because otherwise she's probably not gonna do anything, or, like, stick around, or try whatever. Anyway, so that's my little bit there. Again, it could have lasted, like, a few seconds, like, not too much longer, but, you know, just, essentially, she ends up in the woods, where the woods are suddenly dark, and the trees are, like, growling at her, and she's all frightened and scared. And then she falls into a pit, which is like, oh, what the, are we in, like, the Nightmare Before Christmas? Like, what the fuck? So, yeah, that is bizarre, don't get me wrong. And so she's, like, in a lower end of in a separate forest, question mark? I don't know, like it almost feels like a teleport, like a secret I don't know, it's bad, like, essentially, is what I'm trying to get at here. And it's very convenient, so, again, I'm willing to criticize when the movie's actually doing stuff that's really bad. So, like, you know, there's this big tree in front of her, it's, like, growling and whatever, like, she could have just ran around it, like, and then proceeded deeper into into the continuing forest, and then ended up where she was. Like, easy fix. Like, you didn't need a pit of, like, what made it seem like a teleportation thing going on, but whatever. So a little deer comes out, and then other animals proceed to, as she, like, gently corrals the deer to come with her, because she still has some of the apples on her, she, like, offers, like, a little piece of it, and then the deer comes toward her. And so the deer begins to, like, almost in a very guidely way, kind of, like, acknowledge her. So, like, okay, so they're, like, kind of, I think they kind of, like, fixed, or, like, recognized, like, okay, we need, like, they were still doing they're still doing CGI animals here, clearly, which, you know, I think the CGI of the animals actually looks fine, actually. It's the dwarfs that everyone's are complaining about, so I'm willing to, like, point out, like, the animals actually look fine, here. So, you know, it's very clearly, like, this entire forest is enchanted, as sort of the, alluded to, sort of, like, vibe here, of, like, the deer. It's clearly, like, a smart deer. It, like, nods towards her, and then, like, juts its head to, like, gesture, like, follow me. So she does so, and they get to the dwarf hut, where she goes to, get some rest. So, we cut to speaking of, our CGI dwarves, who I'm even surprised they managed to remember what each emotion was. And they seem to, they do their typical work. They do the mines. Worth pointing out, I suppose, in terms of, like, visual over spectacle of CGI crap, but, they are kind of bad at the job. A little bit. Toward the end of their song, if you notice. Like, they're, like, corralling all of the gems, into this, like, conveyor belt, device, and then, Dopey, like, knocks everything off of the belt, meaning, like, they practically got nothing that day, I guess, or they got less than what they were probably trying to get. And if I were in charge of writing this, I think what I would have done here, obviously, I would have just hired the actors, obviously, avoided the whole mess of that whole thing, conundrum altogether, instead of, like, expending that much more money on CGI. So I would have just hired the short actors, 7 of them. I mean, there is the additive that they need to all be able to sing, so there is that challenge of that, obviously. But, you have tools to assist with that, obviously, and that's clearly also already used in this movie, so why not, right? So that's easy fix number 1. Easy fix number 2 is have the dwarves relatively new to the mining, instead of them mining all of this time. I think that was a grave mistake in alluding to that they've been around. I mean, they claim they've been around for however 2,000 whatever years. And it seems to almost implicitly acknowledge that is also simultaneously the amount of time they've just been mining. And I think that was a grave mistake. I think the alluded part would be that the queen has her will, as it were, has made it this far out, and the dwarves have been contracted or, enslaved in a way to get her more gems and crystals, and this is a very recent development. This is something that they are not used to. That's actually the change that I think would match the political angle of this movie, and have, them being a little bit more, like, not used to the work, and, having the work that Snow White provides later on help them later on. Get to that point. So that's a fix that I would make if I had been in charge of writing this. So there's that. CGI. So obviously they return home with, not as much as I think they would have gotten if they were better at their job, which again, they've been at for so long, so I shrug and go, well, I mean, I don't know. Anyway, they have no clue what a human is, though I think one of them apparently does. So she almost, she almost exits, she almost flees, but then they're still, like, talking. And eventually, the truth of who she is comes forward to the table. And after this, we cut back to the Queen, who is, she goes about her business and gets a new song. And I would argue, I found her songs to be quite delightful. I don't know. I mean, I was, like, smiling, like, oh, they're actually trying to push Gal Gadot. Like, clearly this is outside of her wheelhouse. I think that's something that has been apparent before this movie. But, like, she's giving it a shot. Like, damn. Like, okay. Like, shit, like, okay. You know, that was kind of my attitude during both of her musical, because she gets 2 songs in this movie. And it ends with the huntsman being captured and being arrested because he decided to rebel and give an apple instead of a heart. In terms of, like, you know, he wouldn't do it, but he came back anyway. So we cut back to the house, and now the dwarves attack each other very aggressively. Or, you know, they're very misbehaved. Very akin to, like, a... I'm trying to think of that group, Lost Boys of the Peter Pan. So, again, parallels to other movies, obviously, but, you know, I think that's supposed to elicit, you know, a typical sort of, like, that themes, like, sort of carry out throughout different movies in varying forms. Anyway, so, regardless, Dopey, among the 7 of them, is the one that is left outside. So she decides to, Snow White heads out to talk to him, and then she asks if he can speak, and he just simply nods, and she kind of alludes to, like, oh, you can just whistle or whatever. Which leads to the song Whistle While You Work. This song is particularly one of the more busy ones, with the CGI dwarfs more so than her. But they do manage to help clean their own house after the infighting. But she knows that she cannot stay here long or forever. She actually agrees that she's intruding upon, as Grumpy puts it, upon their household, and she feels like, you know, she's trying to be kind, the obvious thing here, to them by leaving here early. But as she heads out into the woods, they separate from one another. She goes towards this log, and boy oh boy, the most convenient of conveniences of the thief just happening to be here, out in the woods, in this neck of the woods, particularly employing her as the guards are now looking for her, now that the queen knows that she is the fairest of them all and all that. So the prince begins to mock her, which leads into our next song. So not too spread apart from song to song this time around, in that she is currently being, you know, now that I guess he kind of put together that she is a princess, or behaving as a princess, sort of waiting and, you know, kind of, you know, being on that side of things, sings the Princess Problem song. So obviously, this immediately made me think of Moana, and the reason why I want to point this out is because Moana is also a princess. You know, there's the chief, and then she is the daughter. She is the princess of the island. That is her title in the movie. She's literally a princess. And the reason I point that out is because of one of my Disney favorite movies is Mulan. And the reason why that is so interesting to me is that Mulan is not a princess. Not in Mulan 1, not in Mulan 2. She is not a princess. Yet, Disney sold Mulan as a princess. She's pushed into the princess role despite not being a princess. She's the only one that has that excuse to be like, no, I'm not a princess, because she's not. Her father, just to, to talk about a significantly better movie, is both, or at least the original to both the remake and live act and original of Snow White, I would argue. Mulan is the daughter of a soldier that, like he was the one who's going to be drafted to be in a war. She was not attached to royalty. Her father was, like, constricted to go to war, like he was a soldier. So she became a soldier. She became a man, as it were. She became the masculine. She broke the idea of just being the feminine, because she was forced to at that time and in that era in Chinese history. That is definitely why it's one of my favorite movies, is that it never feels like it's like, oh, we're kind of doing this mockery of like, oh, Moana's like this princess, but she doesn't want to be acknowledged as this princess, but she is. Like, that's her title. Same thing here with this song. It's like, princess problems, right? So she is a princess. The thief somehow establishes that on his own, I guess, due to her attitude. I don't even think he fully recognized her as, like, Snow White the princess currently. I don't think he put that together in terms of the narrative structure. So this song actually kind of comes out of nowhere in a weird way. Like, again, it sort of alludes to the attitude of princess without addressing that is her literal title. And again, it very much reminds me of, like, right, Mulan is still, like, the only exception in terms of, like, right, she was never a princess. Belle, who wasn't a princess either, became a queen. Because, the owner of the house, the beast, he was a prince, right? So that sort of made her become a princess. But again, Mulan, even in Mulan 2, still didn't become a princess. In fact, her whole gig in Mulan 2 was to guide a bunch of princesses. And she almost got married, but the whole thing is that gets rejected in that movie. So again, she rejects the princess mold. She's the only one who stays outside of it, legitimately, in both of her movies. And it's definitely why I prefer movies like Lilo and Stitch. No princesses. Very different. And, the live action, obviously, being announced in the trailer, that's a wait and see at this point. There's already some contentions, I guess, already being placed on the whole disguise aspect of the aliens, but, I'm still willing to give it a shot here myself, anyway. Getting back to this movie, so during his little song about her having princess problems, he shows, like, he's still that thief at heart. He steals the locket, gives it back. And he has his own band of people who aren't characters for the most part, with the exception of, like, maybe one of them, who, bizarrely, is a dwarf actor. And I'm like, wait, hold on. You're kidding me, right? This whole issue of the whole CGI dwarf thing came from the problem that you weren't willing to hire 7 of them. But then you have the audacity to still have a short person in your movie, though, and just not hire 6 more of them? What? Why? That is so stupid. And by the way, the prince is also with 6 other individuals. And again, there's like, among the other 6, there's like one other character. The other 4 are like, I don't even know why the fuck they're in the movie. So, yeah, this is definitely bizarre. Like, what the fuck were they thinking? Like, they are over-bloating this for no fucking reason by having the second other group, like, cut all of these. Like, you don't need any of these characters in this movie, obviously. Like, I'll tell you how I would rework the ending, because I think they almost had it, but then they throw in, like, this other character, the crossbowman, I guess I'll call him, because I don't remember his name. That's how memorable he still is that I don't remember his name. Kind of catches into the movie at this juncture. Anyway, so they're all collaborated together, but they're still being hunted down by the outsiders, and in the process of this, like, as she takes one of their horses, like, because she's sneaking around, Snow White is. She's sort of, like, outside the view, because she was told to run earlier, but she, like, thinks to, like, scoop back around and get the horse. So she, like, scoops back around via that horse to get back to John and the others. This proceeds to have John get hit by one of the crossbows on the upper right side of his chest. So they bring him back to the dwarf hut, where they secure and heal him in the process. And when he gets out, the two groups, they suddenly are like, oh, let's celebrate. I'm like, okay, I guess. I mean, I don't know why, but... so the two groups dance, and this is when she gets told that he was the one... I don't know what, like, I don't remember her not seeing it, like... Man, like, I guess I was not paying enough attention, like, maybe, I don't know, like, I guess she was, like, looking elsewhere, I don't know how she didn't catch him taking that bullet for her, crossbow bolt, anyway. So, this causes them to fall in love instantly, and I'm like, well, that's very on brand for Disney. Two people just fall in love over one simple thing. Yep, that's Disney love for you. That's for sure. That's something that is deep entrenched in Disney. That it cannot be avoided. Anywho, so she begins to sing about not being alone anymore, and this obviously turns into a duo with the two of them, and they almost kiss, but all the other people are watching like, ooh, look at them, all getting ready to hook up. So, she gives him the pendant back, as he's gonna look for the king initially, but he ends up back at the castle, he ends up being captured by them. They lured a trap, which he somehow falls for. I don't know. And this is when he's being brought in, the queen gets her second song, as I alluded to. This is her prepping up her big potion and turning into the hag that we see. So she turns into the hag, makes the apple, and makes her way, and she just happens to find where Snow White is. Like, she happens to find the hut, like, instantly. Like, huh? How the fuck did she pull that off? I know she's magical, but like one of the animal, like, this vulture just lands there, and then she's like, I guess she's here. The queen goes, and I'm like, what? That's just how that works now? Okay. We could just find people instantly out of no information whatsoever. Okay. Lazy ass raiders all of a sudden. So she's here offered the apple before she's set out to go potentially read, and, you know, she seemed like she was in a rush, but then I guess the words got to her, so she ate it. And thus passing her out. And as we saw the dwarfs being warned by the animals, and so they're trying to rush back. This is a one-to-one recreation, at least in this moment, where the dwarfs are like rushing back to her, but they're too late. And they see a knocked-out Snow White. We cut back to the queen and how all the people bow to her. She's once again prevailed as the fairest of them all. She's happy. She is satisfied, not happy, with that answer. So John wakes up in a cell with the huntsman, and together, because alone the huntsman couldn't do it alone. So I guess their chains were connected to the same like hook thing. So their strength together was enough to get them out. So it's like, oh, okay. So John rushes back to Snow White. He kind of just gets to the hut as well, rides a horse, gets all the way to her. He knows nothing of the situation, but just kisses her, because that happens in the original, so why not just copy what's in the original without, like... I forget how that was set up in the original. I didn't like that then, and I don't like it now. God damn it, can we stop having people knocked out and having other people having to unconsciously kiss them? It seems very bizarre that is still a thing that we must do. Like, for all the people, like, making fun of this movie for being like, oh, obviously the conservatives use the word woke, obviously, so I'll mirror that. It's like, oh, Disney is getting all woke and all that stuff, and it's like, well, okay, but on the other hand, they're still also willing to show how conservative they are, unironically. It's like, so they're still going to hold on to one of the moments, even as bizarre as that moment is in Snow White. Again, a moment that I was never a fan of, even in the original of Snow White, and definitely don't like here. It's like, so you actually kept it conservative. Oh, okay. You actually kept to the original now, which is so bizarre, considering how many changes you've made to other things. It's like, right. Anyway, so she awakens, and she just comes to the conclusion that her father was murdered. I don't know how she comes to that conclusion immediately, but I guess that's where we're going now. So, due to her just gaining some unsentient knowledge of this, which, again, just continues on the issue of the kiss in general, but it's like, okay, so now you're just gonna stack another issue on top of the issue. It's like, okay, so now she suddenly decides that her father's been killed, so she now has to sing about how she's gonna lead up and sing, instead of being led, being this, once, downgraded to peasantry level, now she must come to lead the people. And so she makes her way back into said town, where the people recognize her and they begin to sing behind her, and they're like, yeah, she's finally back, baby. And the queen comes out with her military force around. So everyone is here. So she talks to her people, saying how she brings up the example of the flower again, alluding to Snow White, and that she is this dagger. Now, she offers, the queen does, the dagger to Snow White. Now, this part, I've seen other criticisms, or a criticism of this movie before reviewing it, and this part was criticized that she does not stab the queen here. And I'm actually going to agree with this part. I think she still should have not done it, but having someone else snipe the short guy, the crossbow guy, snipe the dagger out of her hands, the queen's hands, when she gets her hands on it again, as ready to stab back. I think that is also an issue that needs to be fixed. Because I actually think that this section was almost good, believe it or not. Having her return and having her gesture to the guards and appeal to what they used to know before, I actually thought that was good, appealing to all of that stuff. I thought that was fantastic, in fact. I was like, okay, yeah, good. Like, remind them, like, what they used to live for. That, so far, so good. What I would have fixed is having the guards arrest the queen, instead of her, even having the queen attempt to stab her. Don't, like, get rid of that. Just have the guards arrest her. Or at least attempt to. You know. Instead of this whole rigmarole of, like, now there's all these other characters, and one of them just happens to get up to the castle, like, upper ends and shoots the dagger down. Like, all of that seems unnecessary. So the queen rushes back to the mirror, and she's now angry with the mirror, so much so that she smashes the mirror. The mirror, like, it being shattered causes her to turn into a dark, substance-sized thing, and then get sucked into a different universe, and then it repairs itself. Like, holy fuck, was that all stupid? Like that ending was so stupid. Like, what the fuck was that? I would have had the guards take her away, right? And then everyone's, like, on board with Snow White, you know, being the proper leader. What I think I would have done, right? Because we have all these inserted characters of, like, right. You know, you want to make differences from the original. Alright, let's offer a difference in this movie. And an interesting one. Right? Talking about politics and how that all alludes to this. Right? So she comes in, the queen does. And what I would have done is I would have introduced Maleficent, but she actually has a kid. She wants to pass down, you know, all this wealth, all this power to him or her. It doesn't really matter which, I think. So now you have this juxtaposition, and now you can have a different character that's like opposed to Snow White that is not the queen throughout the movie. That also isn't the huntsman, but gives a different perspective that is different from even the original movie. This is actually how you introduce something that is different while still like building on some of the things that are kind of working in this movie, like the world building, the like allowing the king and queen aspect to allude to the power structure, like all of that stuff works. So let's actually build off of the things that are working in the movie. Let's actually have, Maleficent want to carry down her will. I think I did allude to. I mean, I would personally have the Maleficent have a daughter. I think that would just match. And have that daughter be just as spoiled, just as mean, just as vicious, right? So she's, she's carrying all of those attributes from her mother, as Snow White has gotten her virtues from her father, clearly. So now we have that dynamic added to the movie, right? So we're adding to the movie without removing anything that doesn't need to be there, like all these other thieves that don't need to be in the movie for anything. So now we can have her throughout the movie, and I've decided it's going to be a lady that is opposed to Snow White. So it could be here where the queen has been taken away, she's been arrested by her subjects, but the daughter is still out there, right? Because she was doing whatever, not directly being alluded to this. So I think it'd be an interesting aspect of like, okay, so now they're at this juncture again, but now the people have chosen Snow White, and the evil princess has is like, what the hell? Like, what? Hello, I'm here. Like, I'm entitled. This is me. So I'm gonna go and get the queen out. So she goes to get the queen, and then they try to escape. So now they don't want her to escape, and I would argue that the queen should have kept her ugly role, because that's very much in line with the original movie. So again, playing off of the original but additive, right? Very key. So having them ride together, and they're heading out, and the kingdom's thinking like, oh well, having them still out there is pretty bad. They're probably going to try to do this to somebody else. We probably should not allow that to happen. So, you send out, Snow White obviously is probably going to be on board with heading out herself, because she's, been taught to be brave and bold and all that stuff, so she's definitely going to head out there herself, and then, the thief Jonathan's going to join her. So now we're going to have that conflict, and then we can kind of allude it back to, having it favoring back to more so that original ending where you have the ugly queen now, the hag queen, her entitled daughter riding out, the Snow White and the thief Jonathan catching up, and they end up on this mountainside of okay, this is where things are going to escalate. All the storm, it's going to start to rain. You can start to allude to that very ending of okay, so now, the witch is going to do herself in at this juncture of the movie, and the princess, the evil princess as well, to kind of, mirror the original, but have an original additive part to it. In that, instead of the dwarfs being there in the present of the queen, it's the direct characters. So they arrive there, they have their conflict, and, I'm obviously spitballing here, so I'm not exactly sure how that it would play out, that it would cause the queen to, still try to outmaneuver Snow White while then also simultaneously, like, through doing some sort of action to escape, like she causes herself and the evil princess, quote unquote, to fall both to their dooms. And there's sort of like a moment of recognition of Snow White and the thief here, of like, oh geez, like, we were just sort of hoping to get them back in the jail cell, but that's their fate. They have died, right? And they died due to some sort of action of their own volition. Like, to me, that signals like a respect to the original movie, because that's sort of where the original movie ends up, while still having a new way of getting there. That, to me, is respect while being additive. Instead, she gets sucked into a mirror, which is like, huh? It is so bizarre. And then they celebrate in all white, just out of whatever, and that's where the movie ends. It looks a little silly, that they're all dressed in white. It actually does look a bit creepy, not even gonna lie. I would have just had them all go back to their original colorful costumes instead, but maybe they find like all of like some of their clothing stuff from the castle itself, like the queen was really that entitled that she was actually literally taking their stuff in that sense. But I don't know, again, a bit silly, but whatever. Point being is, like, this movie definitely is still a far cry from being anything good. Like, let's not pretend that it is. And again, there are elements, at least in the early processes of, again, building up that kingdom that are like, okay, like, they're currently adding things. It's like, okay, I'm willing to buy all that stuff. But then it's like, and then it just all falls apart. And it's like, it legitimately makes it worse, in a way. Where it's just like, well, now all of that's been wasted, right? You wasted all of that potential of what Snow White could have been, so much more than it was here. And you're gonna have a lot more fun moments. The queen and the evil daughter get a song together, and that kind of alluding to the Descendants movies. I know that's a thing. Like, Maleficent has a daughter in that movie, right? Like, yeah, actually carry that over. Like, actually, like, utilize your other slide Disney thing and make it, like, an actual thing. Be like, and actually make her stuck up, bad to the bone, because she was inspired by the mom. Very entitled. All that's good stuff. And Maleficent's totally on board with that, because she values that sort of high, dignified way of going about running things. But yeah, clearly a lot of potential, and then have it completely tossed aside for, like, suddenly we're just gonna have non-characters. Suddenly we're gonna play it safe, even though it's creepy. Suddenly we're like, it's like, what are you doing? You don't have to do any of that. It's like, there's so much potential here, and you play it so bizarrely not safe at the beginning, and then you go like, okay, but hold on, we're gonna play it safe though, actually. It's like, why? It's not the time. when you have so much potential, especially if you want to pay respect. It's like, I believe in both things. I believe in paying respect, but I also believe, if you're gonna do a remake, which, Disney's already, like, deep in, so it's like, okay, since we're already here, since we're already in remake system, we're like, fine, we just have to kind of live with the idea that Disney's, like, already so far in the trenches of remakes that there's, like, no end in sight. Fine, whatever. Let's at least try, goddammit. Let's at least try to capture something new and actually, like, stick to that new thing while still paying respect, because I do think both of these things are achievable. Like, it's possible. Like, seriously. Outside of the CJ nightmares are in The Little Mermaid, like, I respected the concept of giving Eric a song and having Eric simultaneously fall in love with The Little Mermaid. I thought that was a fantastic add-on. Like, more of that, yes! Do that more! Like, add things that, like, add to the context of the story. Fantastic, fine, whatever. Like, I'm willing to do that. Like, for what it's worth, again, since we're already in the deep trenches of remakes, it's like, okay, fine, I'm willing to sit through a remake. It's just like, but offer the new stuff, and offer it in a way that's like, oh, okay, I see what you're actually adding on, and, like, actually, like, maintaining it, which is what I think is vitally missing from this movie. It's like, there's not enough differences from the original, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, the political stuff was additive, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. That's the end of the sequence. It's like, okay. So, yeah. So, Snow White was another dud. So we'll see what happens with Leo and Stitch. Apparently the CGI is like, okay, you got Stitch good, apparently, okay. The humans I'm a little iffy on right now. Again, the trailer was relatively short, so it's like, I don't know. Because the emotional aspect of that movie is definitely where I'm like, a little bit more than the goofy stuff, right? Because obviously Stitch is like a, I can talk more about that when that movie drops, but like, in terms of a score for this movie, I think I would have to push for like a 4 out of 10. Like, I don't think I can go any lower, because obviously 4, like, below a 4 is like world, like, the world is like completely like not even functioning in certain areas, and like universe like shit is like going like what the fuck, like it's not that bad, right? But it's obviously not even meh, right? It's not quite a 5 out of 10 either, if we're being completely honest. So I think the best score to give Snow White is a 4 out of 10. I think it's slightly below average. And it definitely had the potential to be a solid 7. Again, add additive to the politics. Double down on the politics. Fucking go all in. Have the 7 dwarfs actually be dwarfs. A pretty simple, I think, like, thing. Obviously they all have to be able to sing, or, we have auto-tune now these days. It's like, I don't think anyone really cares if people can sing, I guess, as long as you can make them sound like they can sing, like, when it comes, because they obviously did that for, Gal Gadot there, but it's like, yeah, like, clearly, like, I think people would be willing to, like, be like, fine, the music's fine, whatever, like, all of that's good. So, like, just build on the new things and be daring enough to actually follow through. I think that's the most important lesson from Snow White, is be brave. Like, for all the guff of, like, the main character of Be Brave. It's like the movie was itself not brave. It wasn't brave enough. It kind of cowered it out at the last minute. The writers did. It's like, so you couldn't even follow your own base moral compass for your film. Okay, got it. So yeah, 4 out of 10. That's my review of Snow White. If you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, second to my PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly, or third to my Discord server, where you can join collab, shield, cool stuff for free. And until next time everyone, bye bye.